Hello and welcome to another Writer Showcase. Allow me to bring in my wonderful guests. Starting with this one for
What
Zilkami.
we two can do, you and me and you. Buck yourself up, don't look so sad. In my master plan.
This is dumb!
Tell me I'm.
It can't be for real! It can't be! No movie could possibly be this stupid! It has to be a dream sequence or...
Butterflies and.
What the hell am I even looking at?
Oh, hello.
And also welcome, aspiring writer.
The fact is, Starscream, despite your treachery, I've allowed you to carry on this long because I took a certain delight in following your string of failures. But you finally become tiresome, predictable. You've hit rock bottom.
The most Chad Megatron ever.
Transformers, ew.
It's Transformers Prime. It's the good one.
Sure, I'll take your word for it.
I know that's not saying much, but it's actually legitimately good by any metric.
Hello, Wissy. I could see you in the chat.
That's Lot West.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Lot West is Wissia. Am I correct in this, Lot West? No, I have not seen that show. I don't watch any Transformers. Except that one as a kid, which I cannot remember.
Oh, Lot West is Wissia. Oh, okay. Cool. Alrighty. And finally, our friend Count Valerian.
Afternoon.
Mr. Third, when do you need to start? Were you getting the right?
Bump, 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 bump.
You are underwater, done. You were underwater for a moment there.
I think that's better.
Okay, when did you want to eat lunch, Valerian? Because if you're doing Cynthia, you can go first, and then we'll just go counterclockwise to me.
By around 4-ish.
Okay, go for it. And then we'll go counterclockwise to aspiring, then Zelkami, and then me.
Okay. Okay, gonna go back to this serious one again. So, Margaret and Barama's fathers got murdered. Well, executed, depending on your point of view. So she and some of her friends and her husband and father-in-law and her sister are having a council to decide what to do about it. So that's what's happening. Well, it depends on your point of view. If you're from a Queckway's point of view, it was totally justified. So, after breakfast and the late morning service in the temple, the Karat's birthday masquerade was held. It was a fun way to take care of deadly serious business. Or it would have been fun if one hadn't been in mourning and frightened on top of that. Normally, mourners weren't meant to take part in festivities of this sort at all. But these were special circumstances. Margaret went as a crow, symbol of her desire to defend the weak. Her sister Audrey came as her namesake, Atradish, sister of the hero Atragund, and a heroine in her own right. Barama went as Sauron, the ancient Turanian king, celebrated for his justice. Edrion and his father, the Duke, had no imagination, so they both went as not very convincing renditions of of the ancient Mindrite hero Atragund. Edrion being the Darzazian equivalent of Atragund. Adrian's sister Sainlin went as the famous Blue Filly of Tyrrhenian myth and legend. Only, of course, she walked upright. The Master at Arms, Graunt, went as a saber-toothed tiger, since he too wasn't very imaginative. The scribe Muku, who had a weird sense of humor, came as a giant cockroach. Duke Edrion was annoyed that he wouldn't be recognized in his disguise. This whole council business was stupid. The governess Varane handed out copies of the treasure map on honey tablets. The maps led in several different directions, none of which was anywhere near the 7th clearing of the southern forest, where the council was to meet. Thither went all those who had been invited to the council, trying to make it look as casual and disorganized as possible. Pardon me a second. The clearing was surrounded by southern beech trees, cypresses, azalea trees, and a few tree horsetails, and was filled with ferns, lobelia, escallonia, fuchsia, eucryphia, and other greenery, no longer quite so green since it was autumn. There was also an annoying colony of potus overhead and several stick birds, along with a pack of shiny rats in the undergrowth, not to mention harmless but intrusive vine snakes. And yes, of course, there were bugs as well, although with the cooler weather, they were not quite as obnoxious as they could have been. The attendees had brought baskets of food and water skins with them, and the game was to keep the surrounding wildlife from enjoying it before you did. The Duke, indeed, paid rather more attention to luncheon than to the council. He and his son sat as comfortably as possible. Muku and Adri also sat, but paid rather more attention to the speakers. The others remained standing. After all the invitees had arrived, Margaret stood up upon a stump and opened the council. Muku took out a pen and a honey tablet and began to scratch notes. You all know the events of last year and how the Emperor has murdered our gracious fathers and spat upon their memory, Margaret began. My father and Barama's, I mean. They probably killed my mother as well. My father certainly believed that she'd been poisoned. Those are merely the crimes committed against us personally, and are far from the only crimes of this emperor. He has also defied the Grand Yaji's decree, and the pretext under which our noble fathers, gracious fathers, our fathers were put to death, being that they aided Muku, the Grand Yaji's representative, and he has oppressed the poor, not to mention the loathsome institution of the Barusa, to which children are invited. Hear, hear, said Barama, but the two Edrions frowned. What's bad about the Barusa? Edrion the younger wondered. He scratched his head languidly, but said nothing out loud. So what are we saying? Said the Duke, opening his luncheon basket. Some of the crimes being ascribed to Exalted seem rather broad. We're reasonably safe out here, but if Exalted want to crush us, it would go ill for us. Our forces are no match for the Imperial Army or Navy, and the Warmont forbids rebellion anyway. He nonchalantly waved away a Potu that had taken an unwelcome interest in his lunch. It allows resistance to tyranny, though, said Barama, or I'm fairly sure it does. And the ruler can't just do whatever he wants to his subjects, said Margaret, raising a hand. The law requires at the very least that he uphold certain moral standards, Exalted has had indecent designs on me and Barama, and still does, I believe. We've reached the age of majority, but still. I was lucky and didn't attract much attention when I was presented at court, added Sainline. A nobleman had brought juggling triplets with him, and Exalted's attention was distracted. But that messenger from the Ambata implied that Exalted wants to nab me, too. I don't care for that idea. He probably discarded us within 3 short months after we got to court anyway, said Margaret, kicking an acorn in disdain and frightening a shiny rat. Grant shot an arrow at the shiny rat, killing it instantly. Then he began shooting potus. Might as well get some game while listening to these lordly people jawing. We can't start a war for a stupid thing like that, said Edrion. It isn't as if he stole your food or your money. He fidgeted. This clearing wasn't very comfortable. How long was this thing going to go on? What was this mania for eating outside anyway? What if it had been you? Said Margaret angrily. You're nice and safe out here. Yes, we're safe, said Edrion, and we'd like to stay that way. If it happened to you, you might feel differently, said Margaret, pounding her fists together. If you had seen that filthy, fat debauchee leering at you, and then he murdered your parents... I didn't mean, said Edrion, but still. Oh, come, muttered the Duke. You're still the head of the family, son, not her. You need to put her in her place. Well, yes, but, said Edrion. The Duke snorted, waved his left hand dismissively, and went back to eating. These Conwarian spinach pasties were good. A jolly sight better than the conversation. So, said Grant after an awkward silence, what should we do? I am going to somehow have to publish the Grand Yaji's decree, said Muku. Luckily, I made a copy of it, but the original, sealed with the seal of the Inyaji, will have to be sent along with the petition. As long as we risk incurring Exalted's displeasure anyway, with this remonstrance, we may as well send the offending decree along with it. Yes, agreed Margaret somewhat impatiently. We'll send it in the same envelope. Anyway, I want to help my mother, said Barama. She's effectively a prisoner, and I want revenge. If we can't kill the Emperor, I want at least to kill those who benefit from this crime. But does the Warmod allow revenge? Asked Audrey in a voice whinier than she meant it to be, while nervously twisting her hair. She wished she were in a room in Serthaton, enjoying a good cry. All this excitement on top of her parents' death had frazzled her nerves. Of course it does, said Barama. Don't be silly. He was getting hungry, which always made him a little snappy. Not to mention the strain of mourning while at the same time keeping up appearances. It's not that silly a question, said Muku, with a slight frown as he paused from taking notes. The Wormwood only allows it if it's proportionate to the crime, and you can't get justice any other way. At least, so I read the passage in the Book of Evil, where it is written, He that slays the innocent child of his enemy stands condemned, nor shall you use cruelty in exacting justice. And likewise in the Book of Justice, Sarainan Tudarashi Haumani Hauminhramaki Huma Basutihani Banmansihani, which means Sauron punished his uncles, but did not go against justice nor beyond it. Yeah, sounds better in Tranian. He resumed scratching his notes on his honey tablet. We don't only want revenge, said Margaret. I want to help the slaves and Saranjis. They're victims too. They need justice. Is it allowable to rebel just because something is unjust? Wondered Slaneland. That's rather general, isn't it? Then couldn't anyone rebel? Finally, someone shows some sense, said the Duke. Instead of assuming we should fight the most powerful empire in the world over nothing. If you had seen how slaves and Saranjis are treated, you wouldn't call it nothing, exploded Margaret, stomping her foot. But... Idron the Younger scratched his head and did his best to consider the matter seriously. Why was it so beastly cold out here? Whose idea was this? Yes, it's unpleasant being a slave. Probably it's unpleasant being ill. Probably. It's unpleasant being ill, but no one fights a war because someone was ill. That's not the same at all, said Baroma. People don't go and make people ill on purpose, except maybe warlocks and witches. But the holy Malala Ama and Munululu'u banished most of them centuries ago anyway. Half a second, let me check something. Anyway, let me see. What does Blessed Muku say? Asked Adri, eager to keep the peace, and hoping that the most learned person present would also be the most rational, which is not always the case. Rebellion is generally forbidden, said Muku, because it's a war within the state. Jambaj Garitam Oud. A legal maxim cited in Gran's commentary, but believed to go back to the ancient Acarian jurists. War is only allowed for a limited just cause. All the jurists agree on that. Some jurists say it's never allowed, although they're not in the mainstream. It is a just cause. Margaret was frustrated. How could they not understand? Protecting and helping the weak has to be just. There's no way enslaving people for debt and subjecting them to the absolute will of a master without recourse to any higher standards outside that will can be just. Taken from the poorest of the peasantry can't possibly be just. It has to be right to defend the poor from tyranny. There was a brief silence in response to Margaret's passionate outburst, broken only by the Duke, who rolled his eyes and began loudly eating a blue-green spinach pastry. It is, agreed Muku cautiously, but I'm not sure the Warmod meant it in so broad a sense, or anyone could rebel and say it was just. As Sainwain points out, so, said Barama, puzzled, revenge is just, but helping the poor is not? He had sat down and was eating rice and Glipton out of a small wooden box. You might help 1 or 2 poor people, even 12 by rebelling, said Muku, but the Emperor of the Lords will take revenge on 81 others. He began to eat a beech fruit with one hand while continuing to take notes with the other. Duke Edrion gave a glassy stare and muttered, obviously, before taking another loud bite of his pastry. Very well, said Margaret, trying relatively successfully to keep her temper. Let's see how many definitely just causes we can come up with. For example, enforcing the Grand Yaji's decree. That comes from authority. Are we actually looking for excuses to fight? Wondered Edrion. It seems to me we should be trying not to fight. We're just discussing the question now, said Muku. Whether any of these is a weed chine. A what? Grant scratched his head. He had never been very good at Turanian. A cause for war, explained Muku. So anyway, let's carry on listing things and we can decide presently which, if any, qualifies. Avenging my gracious parents and uncle, suggested Adri, but I confess this whole thing makes me uncomfortable. Revenge and revenge for revenge and revenge for revenge for revenge. When does it stop? We can't just let the mighty trample all over us, though, countered Barama. He had finished the rice and glyptodon and was now munching a Kalaman plum. Adri gave him an offended look. She hadn't yet forgiven him for snapping at her earlier. I want to rescue some of the victims of the Emperor and the Great Lords, said Margaret. We definitely have the right to free underage Saranjis. The Grand Yaji has forbidden them. She somewhat reluctantly began eating her spiced porridge. She didn't really feel hungry right now. Sauron forbade usury, so we may also rescue indebted peasants, said Barama, offering Adri the rest of his plum, perhaps as a way to make up for his earlier attack of rudeness. She accepted with a curtsy and smiled. We may, perhaps, but it's not possible, alas, to save them all, said Muku. Why are we even talking about this? Exploded the Duke, waving his left arm contemptuously. We are to fight a war because some people are slaves. We are to fight a war because some people are poor. We are to fight a war because some people have the measles, I suppose. If you're bothered by there being poor people, feed them or give them alms. But don't start some stupid war over it. Even little girls who are in way over their heads ought to grasp that. Gracious father, said Edrion, raising a deprecatory if flaccid hand. I will ask you to treat my noble wife, the Countess, with respect. Privately, he sympathized with his father, but thought he was making things even worse. Surely starting a fight would make this ordeal last even longer? If she's the Countess, you're the Count, said the Duke. It seems you ought to use your authority to rein her in, or are you the woman of the household? Margaret drew herself up to her full 5 foot 2 inches and stalked towards the Duke, who looked unimpressed. I will not be reined in by anyone. I will not be forced to be a... She stopped herself and squeezed her hands together in an effort at self-control. With respect, she resumed, but I mean to do something to help the weak. We can discuss what, but something must be done. I think we all need to calm down and let everyone have his voice, said Muku. It is written in the Book of Justice, oh no. Daruyu Ihranainra Liuran, which means, let the assembly be governed by reason. More Turanian jawing, thought Grond. I can't understand half of what these people are saying. Yes, please, agreed Edrion. Calm, calm, and more calm. May Mindaraj be our guide. I'm bored. We cannot right every wrong or free all the slaves on our own. I'm hungry. It's cold out here. He too broke out his lunch, although he hated picnics. He wasn't over fond of the outdoors in general. And trying to keep the local animals from sharing his lunch was a bother. And these people made everything a screaming, oh, why couldn't they just calm down and get on with life? And it was too cold. Let me see. There's still a few minutes left. Let's see. How long have I been reading?
20 minutes.
How many minutes?
20.
Okay, then I should stop here. Okay, I'll stop there then. Yeah, that's kind of a lengthy scene.
Good council scene. I kind of had a hard time kind of picturing the scenery or like kind of understanding like the like I got like the dress of the people, and that was good. But it was kind of like I was a bit confused at first whether or not it was a address to the people or a council of lords.
It's a council, but it's a council only of certain invitees. It's like a secret council of certain invitees. It's not a council in an official sense. It's not an uppercase council. It's a lowercase council.
Hmm. Yeah, kind of like the Lord's Declarant.
Yeah, I mean it's Margaret and certain friends, relatives, and her husband and her father-in-law had to be invited because he's the Duke and they're in his palace, so they kind of had to invite him along. Not to mention he's her father-in-law as well, so they kind of had to invite him along.
Even if he's kind of an idiot.
Yes. Well, Margaret thinks he's an idiot anyway. He thinks she's an idiot.
Okay. Reading is a bit confusing. I couldn't tell when the person talking changed. Okay.
Yeah, that would be my delivery. Was it like maybe because I'm not as good at doing different voices.
Could also be that the dialogue for the characters is relatively similar at points. There is like a difference of characterization with the voices, but just in how they're written.
I really liked the use of the term luncheon basket. That was great.
Yeah. Who is luncheon basket?
Luncheon basket. That was like a chef's kiss.
Mm.
That's good. That's good fantasy.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Confusing who is talking because, yeah, I mean, you're not going to get deep characterization in this story, but
Not deep, but memorable. Fatty Bulger is memorable, even if he is a completely shallow and almost useless character.
There was a parody where Fatty Bulger took over the Shire.
Sounds hilarious.
Oh, and he established a kind of a bizarre communist regime, except without any trees because he had a phobia of wood.
All sounds about right for fat cats.
Yeah. Anything else? Let's see. Let me look and see what people have been saying. People
Alrighty.
don't make people ill. Obviously, you haven't been in a pandemic. Who has no rights? Who has no rights? Who has no rights again? I'm sorry, what's that?
A Kwekwe, I couldn't spell the name.
Ikwekwe, yeah.
My firm belief is that if you're a murderer, if you do something evil to a child, or if you rape somebody, you have lost the right to live.
So basically, you think they should just up and kill him?
Yes.
Oh, so you're
And also that applies for real life as well. Well, that's my firm belief.
Well, I mean, if anyone deserves to die, he probably does.
Yep.
But as far as he's concerned, he's the law.
Yeah,
Oh.
because he's psychotic.
And also, to be fair, that's been the tradition for some time since the Chuggins took over.
Dense based, super based. I don't think
Yeah,
I'm that
kind of.
based.
Kind of, yeah.
I don't think I'm that based to say that murderers, child abusers, or child rapists, or just rapists in general.
The Emperor has the right to put people to death. He gave reasons They were tried properly. They got a fair trial. They deserved to die because he said they did. Don't you understand what this story means?
Yeah, that you're biased.
No, actually. Actually, either that or I'm being sarcastic, one or the other, or both.
Your straw man is biased. You're being facetious.
Yeah, the straw man's biased. So that's that.
I don't know that I would say that I would wish them dead. I'd just say that, like, if you do that, you have by your own actions forfeited your right to be alive because you've done something so heinous that society has no obligations to keep you alive anymore.
It's just
It's a complicated
It's all-
thing.
consider pedophilia to be a mental illness that if you manage to cure them and rehabilitate them, fucking alarm. Maybe
Only-
then they can be decent human beings.
Well, it's like my perspective is the second if you act on it, you can be understanding of it, and like I know I'm attracted to children, but I'm not going to act on it.
Oh yeah.
That's fine. But if the second you act on it, then you do not have the right to live anymore.
Now is probably not the time for me to remind you that Ekwekwe also likes cross-dressing monkeys.
Does he like screwing the monkeys?
No comment. I don't want to go into details. The details would be a little disgusting.
There's lots of weird fetishes out there. Just don't act on the weirdest ones. Like being a
Yeah.
furry.
All right.
Also, Ekwekwe is kind of like, basically, it's like whatever I want, is law. Whatever I feel like doing at any moment is law. If I feel like killing these guys, so I'm going to kill them, and that's law because I feel like doing it, and I'm the emperor, so I can do what I like. So,
So essentially, he's Nero.
yeah. Nero did some disgusting sexual things too, but no comment.
Precisely. Anyway, aspiring writer, your turn.
Yes, let's
All
move
right.
on.
Recap. We're in my second POV character. The raid that they were performing on the ship's been done. He had a whole conversation with Mitra about the royal guard he found on the ship and how he thinks that he might be in trouble and that he's gonna go into hiding. Mitra supported this, and Q is now about to settle down somewhere for a few days. Somebody touched his shoulder. Q's eyes shot open, awareness rushing back into him in a flood of senses as his body tensed. His hand lashed out and grabbed the assailant by the neck. His other hand, which was already gripping his MKR underneath his coat, whipped out, pointing the large gun at whoever had touched him, ready to fire. Q, stop! He did. His finger ready on the trigger, he looked up, blinking away the blurriness in his eyes. He was holding the Philly's pilot by the throat, his MKR poking into his stomach. The one who had cried out was his fellow co-pilot, who had a hand on her plasma arm, still in its holster, hand outreached as if to stop him. Q let the Phillies go, putting his hands up apologetically. Sorry, old habits. He got up and brushed the Phillies down. The Phillies rubbed his neck where Q had choked him, breathing heavily. Seal's claws, you're fast. He coughed, giving Q a sideways look. And jumpy. For once, Q didn't have a response. Once he had caught his breath, the Phillies went back to his post, his co-pilot finally taking her hand off the plasma arm. Q didn't miss how at least one of them now kept him in the corner of their eye. We are here, I presume? The human pilot nodded. We're in Cellin 2's orbit at the moment. We need you to tell us where you want us to drop you off. Stepping forward, Q forward between the pilots for a better view of the planet, hands on the backrest for support. In front of them was the rotating gray mass of stone and ice that the galaxy called Cellin 2. The planet was around one standard size and had no ethene layer in its inner crust to affect gravity within its thin atmosphere. Slightly obscured behind the planet was the system's dwarf star, Cellin, safely visible through the ship's viewport. On the navigational panel was a display of Cellin 2 with several locations, the underground districts and mines, marked by red dots. Created back in the early centuries of the Ascending Territory by a private company, there were over 50 of these subterranean communities scattered throughout the planet, all kept warm by atmospheric control centers and yielding dozens of tunnel systems going deep into the planet. The mines had long since ran dry of any valuable material, and efforts to further mine the planet had been abandoned due to cost. However, many opportunists eventually realized the value of all the free space the mines provided, and without any surviving maps of the mines, it made them the perfect place to disappear. Go to the one here, Kuehl told them, pointing at a specific mark in the northern hemisphere of the display. Of all the locations, this was the only one close enough to one of the other districts that their tunnel systems intertwined with one another, making it his go-to. The pilots nodded and started their ascent. With no clouds, Q could see the surface grow closer and closer until the ground was zooming by them, dirty ice spanning as far as he could see. The ship started to slow as they reached their destination, a large, metal-plated shaft wide enough to fit a cruiser, with an atmospheric shield topping it. Lowering themselves down the shaft, Q saw one of the most common and vicious of the flying pests that plagued the planet dive by. Gray as a stone that was so plentiful here, Yawmites were slender creatures with circular mouths of needle-like teeth, and split off into several hooked tails that used to hang from the cavern walls. With 4 beady eyes equally distant on its cylindrical form, they lunged at anything that came into their sights, normally other flying pests, but occasionally people. They were also quite tasty when roasted. Reaching the bottom of the shaft, they turned the ship until they were facing the landing dock, a large cavern before the subterranean town proper, separated from the shaft by another atmospheric shield at its entrance. Slowly easing the frigate in, the pilots looked for any available space to land. Unlike official landing docks, there weren't any set areas for ships to set down, so vessels of all configurations and sizes were arranged haphazardly, with pilots landing anywhere with space. The pilots visually scanned the entire landing dock area for room, and after their second round of the place, Q grabbed the human pilot by the collar and pulled her out of her seat. "Hey!" the Phillies pilot protested, reaching for his plasma arm, but by the time he had it out, Q had already seated himself next to him. Drawing a glance at his friend, he slowly holstered the weapon, deciding not to escalate things. The human pilot stood over Q's shoulder, looking perturbed at being pushed out of her own chair, glaring daggers at him, but didn't protest. Q found a space almost immediately, back near the entrance of the landing dock. He started making his way there before the Phillies pilot stopped him. "Spot there's too narrow," he said, not looking up from the controls. "We need to find another." Ignoring him and continuing forward, Q retorted, "That's the largest space you're going to get there, so I suggest you cope." He flashed the pilot a forced smile before returning to the controls. If he had to judge himself, Q would say he was a serviceable pilot. Serviceable was not enough for what Q was trying to do. With a small shuttle at his front, 2 large freighters to the left and behind, and a large cruiser that jutted out over the spots he wanted to land to his right, Q was trying to reach into a Stardom generator without getting electrocuted. He almost hit one of the ships several times, but thankfully, while timid, the Phillies pilot was more than serviceable. Managing to slip them through the tight fit, he set them down softly, letting out a breath he had been holding in, resting back into his seat. "I see you had Mitra trust you two with one of her stealth frigates," Q said, getting up. "Now it's time we part." He tipped his hat at them. "Thank you for the safe travel. Until we meet again." The pilots responded with grunts, looking displeased at the notion of seeing him again. They didn't even wait for him to set foot outside, the frigate already starting to rise as Q had the ramp lowered, forcing him to jump off. Chuckling, he stood and watched the frigate maneuver its way out of the landing dock until it was out of sight. Turning toward the direction of the town entrance, he started making his way through the scattered ships. The landing dock was dimly lit, most of the light coming out of the cargo bays of larger vessels. The air was musty despite the atmospheric controls, and it would normally be chilly, but all the collected ships kept the area warm. Walking through, Q could see the place was abuzz with activity. There were still people who lived in these subterranean towns and depended on trade for most resources, which was all done at the vessel of the one shipping the goods, turning the landing dock into a makeshift market. In just one glance, he saw a human haggling for food, a Phillies arguing over the contents of a crate, another looking uncertain at another ship's goods, and even a group of Maquis shopping for insulated clothing made to keep them warm and moist. Why any Maquis would live in a place like Sullen 2 was beyond him. They weren't exactly known for dealing well with cold climates. Merchants tried calling for his attention, waving him down or to something in their stock that they thought he'd like. He passed them without so much as a glance. Reaching the entrance and entering the city proper, Q noted the empty streets, warmly lit from lights on the floor and ceiling, as if trying to convince you it was warm. There wasn't really a day or night in Sullen 2. When you were underground, it didn't really matter whether or not the side of your planet was facing the sun, but there were still active and inactive hours, as if there was a daylight cycle. Right then was this output's equivalent of night. Late night, if the lack of light from any windows was any indication. Across on the other side, Q knew would be the entrance to the tunnel system. All the outposts of Sullen 2 looked more or less the same, with stone buildings that touched the cavern ceiling, 3 levels high, and a landing dock on one side with the tunnels at the other. He took one step forward before hesitating. He planned to go underground for a rotation or two before smuggling himself all over the world, and once he was off, he was going to have to keep on the move. If he wanted information, now would be the time. Taking a turn, he started counting buildings. Unless you were familiar with the area, the only way you knew where to go is by counting each building you passed. There was little to help distinguish them from each other, at least on the outside. All were equally sized, with glassless windows that served no purpose. Even when he found where he was heading, Q could barely tell he was in the right place. Inside was a different story. Stepping through the swinging door, his nostrils were assaulted from the aroma of tens of different scented candles. The floor was covered in a red gold carpet, with a large cushion in the corner to sit on. To the side was a room where guests removed their footwear, the carpet leading up to it dirty and pressed down. All designed to emulate the furnishings common on another planet, he couldn't remember which. The hostel was a drastic change to the rest of the town. Sitting in the center, cross-legged, was the hostel owner and info broker, Podal, in a plain green top to reach below his knees, and he called it Curtis. He looked up from his low desk and, at seeing him, froze. His face looking more gaunt than usual, he stared at Q, as if not believing he was there. Q dropped down to the floor in front of him. "Surprised to see me?" Podal didn't respond. Rolling his eyes, Q gave him an exasperated look. "Look, I don't care about your little rule. I'm not rude with my boots. They're not exactly your casual footwear." Podal finally seemed to find himself, straightening up. "Fine, but yes, this is indeed a surprise. You haven't came to see me in, how long? 2 standard months?" "As if I keep track," Q mumbled. "So how's business been going? Anyone staying in one of your rooms?" He pointed to the 2 parallel hallways to either side of and behind Podal. Podal started to look back before stopping himself. "Why? You consider staying in one?" Q let out a huff. "Funny." He pulled back the side of his coat to reveal his MKR hidden inside. "Now, is there anyone inside one of the rooms that I need to worry about?" "You threatening me with the drug?" he asked politely. Brow furrowing, Q looked down and saw that, instead of his MKR being visible, he was showing off a blue syringe threateningly. "It's a paralytic toxin, not a drug, and I wasn't threatening you, I was threatening anyone in one of those rooms that you don't tell me about." "There's no one," Podal said firmly. "Business has been slow." He gave Q a look. "Both of them have been." "Well, how about we change that, shall we? I'm here," he cut off as Podal took out a unit screen and dropped it on the table. "Up front. Not telling you anything till you do." Grumbling, Q picked up the screen and raised an eyebrow at the number of units Podal had set to transfer. Impatient, he input his code and took out a glove with a fake handprint for the hand scan. His own unit account, the one under his birth name, wasn't usable anymore. Any transfer made from it could be tracked. Fortunately, he'd bribed a clerk to create a fake account when he was still in the royal families, and the glove he wore had the handprint connected to the account. Setting the glove hand on the screen, he finished confirming the transfer. "Happy now?" Podal shrugged as he took back the screen, sniffing. "So what do you want to know?" "Anyone been asking after me?" Revolutionaries still are. Still not sure why. They've always wanted to hire me for some odd job or other, he said with a dismissive wave. Padal didn't seem satisfied with that answer. They've been awfully persistent this time around while not giving any details on why they want you. They normally aren't this tight-lipped about what they want you for. The revolutionaries aren't really my biggest concern right now. Anyone else? Not really, he said with a shrug. At least, nothing if you exclude everyone looking to hire you. Do you want me to list those off? Q shook his head, thinking. Has anything come up about the Dialia? Anything related to me? Padal snickered. Q, they're Mindhost hunters. You're not in their profile, no matter how troublesome you are. Okay, but have you heard anything? He shook his head. Nothing, sorry. Mirage Royal Guard? Another shake. Angels? Padal narrowed his eyes. Why you ask? You know anything? Why would I be asking if I knew? Q chided. Well, what do you want to know? Q gave him a look. Whatever they're doing, this is the Angels. They always have something going. Padal nodded by the inside of his cheek. Well, I can't say anything specific, unfortunately. There's been some hints of... He hesitated before continuing. Some hints of the Supreme Commander fighting with the Executor to have the Angels, or at least the siblings, for an offensive. Thinks he found the location of an evolutogenetics center. Q scoffed thoughtfully. Life isn't more than a small cell. If the Angels could call it away, they'll be back within the day. Maybe, Padal mused, sounding less certain. But that probably explains why it's been so quiet. Probably, Q said, hiding his own skepticism. He doubted any bureaucratic tape would keep the Angels out of action, but it was two sources quietly butting heads, and the Angels had been called away before. What's happening with the Laticians, he asked, changing the subject while gently giving Padal an opening to mention any oddities in recent Latician shipyard raids. They're still fighting with the Allens over the royal family that's probably going to go under. The Collins. Padal raised an eyebrow at him. You know them? I remember them as being self-destructively prideful and ambitious. He frowned. Well, the current head, at least. Your daughter seemed amiable enough, especially for a host. What exactly is the situation there? Padal shrugged. The Collins seem intent on not asking or receiving help from any of the other families or Mirage herself. If they go under, they'll go to the Laticians or Allens, but right now it could go either way, so they've been trying to convince the Collins to merge with them, but no such luck. The corner of Q's lip curved up. Royal family drama was always nice to hear. It was a shame he wouldn't be around to see it unfold. Anything else? About the Collins situation or the Laticians? Thinking for a moment, he said the Laticians. They've been hosting more gatherings off late, meeting with select royal families. Same goes for the Allens, and it hasn't passed me that the groups they've been meeting with have been mixing less and less. Secret meetings behind closed door by the two most powerful royal families. Q suddenly wished he was sitting on a chair to lean back against. I'll be surprised if nothing comes of it. How bad do you think it escalate? Padal asked, taking out a screen to note down what he said. The Allens hate the Laticians about as much as me, so I'd place my bet on violently. Q raised an eyebrow. Anything odd been happening with Latician shipments? Maybe an increase in attacks from the Allens? No, not that I've heard of. Well, it was worth a shot. Q stood up, making Padal snap his head at him. You're leaving? He asked, his voice a pitch higher than normal. Q lifted an eyebrow. Yeah, I was only passing by for a visit, going underground for a while. What's got you so worried? Looking like he'd been poked between the eyes, Padal shook his head, recovering. It's nothing. Nothing that concerns you, that is. Q nodded slowly, drawing another glance at the hallway. Give ever hiding my regards. Inclining his head, he exited the hostel, not bothering to wait for Padal's reaction. Wherever he was hiding probably wasn't important enough to chew him out about. Heading toward the tunnels, it wasn't until he made a turn that he noticed someone was following him. And that's the end. Thoughts, comments, critiques, concerns.
I think like part of it was like I had a little bit of trouble kind of following like what was the point of it all at some points.
I like the planet bit.
Yeah, the planets and a bit. I think there's like a lot of good points where you kind of describe the scenery. I'm kind of just trying to figure out like what's the point of this in the story. Like how is this furthering the plot? Or
Which part specifically?
I think it was just kind of in general. Like I had a hard time following it.
I mean, clearly there's some politics going on with the royal family, and I forget who the angels are.
Angels are Super Death Squad. I'll say this, everything is relevant to what's going to happen next chapter and future chapters.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounded like it was setting something up.
Anything else?
That's pretty much what hopped to my head. That I like the bit where they're coming to the planet, because anything where they're coming to a different planet, and the day and night thing, that sounded interesting too.
Yeah, the Padal Seek is probably what you guys were like, how is this relevant, correct?
Probably, yeah. I think I also like I'm having probably like maybe it's due to the formatting. Like I'm having trouble like remembering like if we've met this character before.
Which character, Padal?
Well, just any of the characters in here.
I definitely Q we've met before, but I can't remember the other one very well.
It could be like just the nature of like so many like intervals between your readings.
Could be. I'll say this, besides Q, there's no character in this we've just seen before.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Padal is just someone he tends to go for information. And he was like, I'll go to him before I go underground. Which ends up costing him. Also gave me a chance to explain how fucking unit accounts worked. If that's all, then I guess it's alchemy.
He seems to be. Oh, there he goes.
Yeah, sure. I can go and just get started.
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. Tethra surveyed his office with nervous eyes. Confirming he was alone, he lowered his pen and wrote 2357.5 under the total sum field of the tax sheet. Finally, he stamped an envelope the parchment and placed it in the outgoing high priority box, and his revenge was complete. It was the best kind of revenge because no one would ever be angry at him for it, nor should they know to be angry at all. When the form went up to Mr. Mech's office for final review, he would quickly catch that 2,357.5 would be an absurd amount of gross profit to be earned from a fishing line in Kendall province, and he would have to fetch the correction page to rectify the error. The correction page Tethra had intentionally dropped underneath Mr. Mech's desk last time he was in there. Perhaps, Tethra mused, Mr. Mecha would erase the entire value, then curse himself when he realized it was only necessary to erase the decimal point, changing 2,357.5 to 235.75. Tethra sighed contentedly and drummed his fingers on the desk. He'd been making intentional errors like this for months now, with such regularity, Mr. Mecha believed it was simply the way things were at Lowland Standard Tools and Materials Company. It wasn't always, of course. The elder Mr. Mecha had suffered an early retirement as the result of a debilitating stroke, leaving his irresponsible son to the job. A shrewd and pragmatic businessman, the elder Mr. Mecha respected Tethra, a loyal employee of 18 years, enough to never so much as learn his name. Now it was Tethra this and Tethra that. Tethra, what are the apprentices laughing at behind my back? I know they're doing it. Sorry. Tethra, why aren't you making as much money on builder's tools this season? My father made twice as much this season last year. You must be marking them down for taxation wrong. Perhaps, Tethra seethed to himself, we'd be making more money if you hadn't insisted on shipping so early, because the product's lifespan was predicted to expire. The tools they've already got work fine. Instead, of course, Tethra always said, yes, sir, Mr. Mecha, I'll see what I can do. And he went off to devise some way he could mildly inconvenience the man while still fixing the problem. The best part about these petty revenges was that there was no risk to his own livelihood. Tethra heard stories about accountants and middle managers at their wits' end, sabotaging their employers, only to have the entire business collapse around them. Unlike them, Tethra never once pushed his luck, and his pay would stay the same right up until the factory shut down for good, whenever that might be. Not that Tethra was in any danger of destitution anyway. He lived frugally off his salary, and now that his parasite was gone, he had more money than he knew what to do with. He considered taking another swipe at the labor system by leaving for lunch 5 minutes early, when the younger Mr. Mecha pried the door aside and barged into the room. "Tethra," Mr. Mecha shouted. "Yes, sir." Tethra sat up straight and clapped his pen down on the desk, a gesture he hoped would convince his employer he might have interrupted him doing something important. "Explain this," Mr. Mecha commanded, and slapped a piece of paper down on the desk. From the desk and offices of Tigre Mining and Quarry Survey, it read. Addressing Boss Mecha of the Lowland Standard Tools and Materials Co. I have received complaints from my constituents regarding the contents of your latest shipment of rope. These threads, especially on the Type 01 ropes, are considerably lower quality than what we've come to expect from you. Since using it in our harnesses, our burrs have become noticeably more irritable and disorderly. It went on like that for several pages. Therefore, at the recommendation of my advisors, we've decided to terminate our exclusive partnership with you and take our business to other suppliers. Out of respect to our business relationship, the change will not take effect until the conclusion of your next shipment to us. You will find a copy and details and inventory of said shipment attached to this letter. Tethra read the letter and looked back up at Mr. Mecha. When his gaze did not abide, Tethra read the letter again, thinking perhaps he'd missed a piece of information pertaining to himself. Could one of his intentional errors be the cause of all this, he wondered? It appears Tigre Mining has cut all. I know that, Mr. Mecha snapped. I want you to explain to me what we're supposed to do about it. Tethra sat back in the splintering edges of his chair. This was indeed serious. Tigre Mining and Quarry was their largest buyer. I'm not sure what you mean, Tethra stammered, and immediately regretted it. Too open-ended. He just prompted Mr. Mecha to explain further. What I mean is, he continued, that's a lot of money we're not going to be making, and isn't that your problem to deal with? No, sir, Tethra said. I don't make the money, I just count it. Don't get smart with me. Just tell me how we're supposed to fix this. Tethra knew exactly whose job it was to fix this, but he was in no mood to get into an argument. I don't know, sir, Tethra said. He sat stock still and hoped the silence would drive his employer from the room. Mr. Mecha scratched at his cheek and looked around, ready to ask another array of questions. You could talk to engineering, Tethra said hurriedly. They could tell you why the quality of the rope degraded. Again, Tethra knew exactly why the rope was degrading, and unless the engineers not to pass the blame on to someone else, Mr. Mecha would be back in Tethra's office tomorrow. Mr. Mecha scowled and slunk out of the room. Tethra heard him say something about the attitude problem around here as he left. Yes, sir, Tethra responded compulsively. Tethra glanced at the clock on the shelf. It read 3 minutes until he was supposed to leave. Outside of the pavilion, Tethra stared at the tea house he usually took his lunch at. The line was even shorter than usual. At this rate, he would finish his meal and have to return to work long before he was required to. He looked around for a way to delay himself. He thought perhaps to browse the mercery, but rejected the idea completely. He had just bought a new robe for the previous week. There was nowhere in the pavilion to spend his time. But outside, now there was a thought. Tethra left the pavilion from the north threshold. With nowhere in particular to go, he decided he would walk a sufficient distance before looking for food. Just give me 1 second. At last he settled on a market stand selling chateau. It tasted like cow droppings, but there was a pleasant enough fountain by the plaza to sit on. My stars, Tethra, is that you? Hearing his name called aloud like that, wrenched the bowl in his hand, flinging bits of potato and mushroom into the fountain. He spun to see his old friend Amel striding towards him, some massive binder overflowing with papers under one arm, as usual. It really is, Amel said, the familiar look of giddy excitement all over his face. Tethra extended his arm belatedly and feigned a smile. Every instinct in his body was telling him to leave, get angry, run away, pretend not to be this so-called Tethra. But instead, Amel, it's been a while. It's been ages. Amel ignored the arm and pulled him in for a quick hug. Please, let's find somewhere to sit. And Tethra found himself being pulled into an alleyway tea house. When the waitress approached them, Amel waved her away, exclaiming, "Bring us anything, I'm paying." You really don't have to. Nonsense, Amel cut him off. Look, his demeanor shifted. I'm sorry how we ended things. Tethra squirmed and tried to reply. No, I'm sorry. I wish it could have been better, but I am sorry about that. Tethra tilted his head, not quite looking Amel in the eye. You're in a good mood, Tethra said. Amel's face lit up like he'd just been reminded about it. Oh yes, I have great news. He leaned forward in mock conspiracy. I finally passed my Abby's exam. Oh, Tethra said. Fantastic. And I did better than pass, he went on. The board was so impressed with my statements and testimony, I'm skipping a local abbotship and I'm going straight to superintendent. Wow. Tethra was genuinely impressed. He really didn't have the words. I know. There's a new monastery being built up by the north border, and they want me to run it. I'm actually leaving in just a few hours. I was picking up some things from the schoolhouse before I left, and I thought I'd take one last look at the city, and I run into you. What are the odds? Small. Tethra laughed, hiding his nervousness. Enough about me, Amel said. How are things with you? Still at standard tools and materials? Tethra groaned in exasperation. Oh, you wouldn't believe it. Mecca up and had a stroke a year ago. Now his idiot son is running the business into the water. Amel laughed, and they continued chatting idly, sharing benign stories since they last met. Their drinks came and the conversation waned. Well, it was nice to see you again, but I really have to be going, Tethra said, standing up, his drink not yet finished. No, wait, Amel said, and the weight that had been building in Tethra's stomach sunk even lower. I am sorry, but I have to ask, how is Kraylene? And there it was. Oh, she's doing just fine, Tethra said. Still, you have to think about it. Studying hard, Amel grinned. Oh, where'd you send her? Nowhere. I hired tutors. Amel frowned. Tutors? She doesn't need that kind of attention. What she needs is an environment where she can... He stopped himself. Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad to hear she's doing well. As a matter of fact, Amel rummaged through the binder and pulled out a worn old folder. I have some of Kraylene's old writings and diagrams. I'd like to save my students' best work, but I think she should have them. I still have some time before I leave. Would it be all right with you if I just popped over and gave them to her? Say goodbye for real this time. Tethra swallowed and looked away. What? Tethra, what's wrong? Sorry, it's just... She's a bit sick right now and needs to rest. I don't think that... Tethra, please. Not for her, for me. Just let me see her. Tethra looked away. Tethra, how sick is she? What aren't you telling me? Tethra cursed under his breath. He had always been a horrible liar. Look, Tethra said, I lied, okay? She isn't sick. She's... He leaned in and whispered, Gone. Gone? Amel exclaimed. Tethra motioned for him to be quiet. What do you mean, gone? He leaned in, matching Tethra's tone. I mean, she's gone. 16 months ago, I wake up and she just isn't in her room. No trace of her. No one saw her leave the house. What? Amel gasped. Were there any leads? What did the investigators say? Tethra had to look away. Tethra, you didn't... Shh! Tethra hissed. You didn't tell anyone? You're actually happy about this, aren't you? Amel said, realizing. You've always resented that poor child, but at least until now you've had the shame to own up to your mistake. My mistake? Tethra snapped. She wasn't my mistake. She was... It doesn't matter. Amel cut him off. She was yours to take care of, and you made it her problem. You know, your wife was a real piece of work walking off like that, but she was right about you. There was a long pause. Well, Tethra said, don't you have somewhere to be? Amel glared at him. Then he looked up, off to the side, contemplating. Come on, he said, pressing a salad into the palm of the unsuspecting waitress. He stood up and stormed out of the tea house. Come on, Tethra said, following. Come on what? Where are you going? Amel said nothing and paced angrily down the street. Tethra followed him a distance until they passed the gymnasium and he realized where they were headed. No, stop. Tethra rushed ahead, but Amel pushed him aside. What do you think you're doing? Tethra growled, but Amel kept ignoring him. When Amel reached his destination, he rapped on the door furiously and called him aside. Gila, open the door. Gila doesn't work here anymore, Tethra said. Amel gave him an askance look and surveyed the exterior of Tethra's apartment. Excuse me. Without missing a beat, he leapt up and began scaling the wall. What do you... Get down from there, Tethra shouted, but Amel gave no indication of hearing him. Amel, Tethra called, just come down. I will let you inside, all right? Amel sighed and dropped back down to the cobblestones. They slid the door to Kraylene's room aside. Amel stepped inside gingerly and looked around. And you haven't been in here since she disappeared, he asked. Nope, didn't even touch the sheets. Tethra replied, looking at the bed. The blanket's still half unmade. Other than an airy coat of dust, the room was spotless. And you're sure you didn't hear anything? Amel moved to the window and looked down. It was a sheer drop 3 stories down to hard pavement in any direction. There was no sign of a break-in, Tethra said. I'm telling you, I think she just got up and walked out in the middle of the night. Amel regarded him almost quizzically. Look at yourself, he sneered. You so easily accept that your own daughter left you without a trace. You're probably right, though. I don't blame her, keeping a girl like that stuck in this stuffy old house. Tethra said nothing. The question is, where did she go? Amel opened the dresser. Plenty of clothes were still in there. Did she usually keep her bag in here? He asked. I think so, Tethra said. It's not there? No. Amel closed the dresser. If they couldn't find what else was missing, perhaps they could identify where she was. There was nothing else of interest Tethra could identify. Some clothes and a hairbrush were all they found missing. Then Amel spotted the bookshelf. There was a prominent gap in the books on the second level. Amel looked closer, running his finger over the titles. All organized alphabetically. He checked again to be sure. There was no doubt about it. Tethri, Amel said, Kraylene's favorite book is missing. So, she took it with her. Why wouldn't she? Tethri, Amel was livid now. Do you know what Kraylene's favorite book is? No. Your favorite book, Amel said, his face darkening, is Rubodria of Glaze. Tethra said nothing. Do you know what it's about? Tethra shook his head. It's about a young Glean prince who runs away from his tribe and joins the Eratran army. Tethra frowned. So you think... That's exactly what I think, Amel snapped. Would they just let her in like that? I don't know. They let anybody in, as long as you can pass the physical. And what happens to you if they fail? What happens to you if you fail? Nothing. They send you away and that's it. Try again later. The pair sat and thought. Even then, she's exactly the type they want. Young, impressionable. She's still intelligent. Sometimes they find use for you anyway. So she could be anywhere. Amel scoffed. Just about it. She's been gone more than a year. She could be halfway around the world by now. That's assuming we're even right about this. For all we know, she could be dead in a gutter right now. They went outside. Amel looked sick. Tethri, he said, I can't stay. The council's taking a big risk on me right now. If I make one mistake, it'll be another 5 years before I can even take the exam again. Then go, Tethri said. Don't let me keep you. It isn't you. Amel wrung his hands inside. Please, if you have any respect for our old friendship, please just look for her for me. Amel dropped Kraylene's folder into Tethri's hands. And with that, he was gone. That's all I got right now.
Interesting.
Interesting premise, yeah.
It seems very steampunky. Or what exactly were you going for?
Oh, it's not. I think there's not a lot of. This is sort of like a. It's definitely not steampunk. I see how you get that impression, but it's just not. I didn't do much of the describing of the setting in this. This isn't meant to be a chapter 1. This is like a sort of a short aside I'm writing.
Oh, okay.
It's closer to medieval, but I wouldn't call it medieval though. I'm doing a lot of weird stuff here.
Like Renaissance-y? Or would you know is it Revolutionary War?
I guess Renaissance. It's very Renaissance-y here, but like as you go to like different places, it's gonna be the technology is gonna be like widely different depending on where you are. Oh, was it understandable? As I was reading, I kind of noticed that like some of the dialogue, it didn't flow very well, probably because of the way I was narrating it. I'm not much of a narrator. I can't do voice very well.
Mm.
That was clear enough. I mean, the one chap's daughter has run off, and the other chap is yelling at the chap whose daughter ran off because he doesn't care of him properly. Exactly. I guess the other chap is in love with her or something. Otherwise, why is he?
Oh no! He was like he was like her school teacher, basically.
Oh, okay.
I could see how that wasn't. Maybe that wasn't. I'm gonna make a note of that actually.
I mean,
that's unclear.
One small thing Askance look. You looked at him
Oh, yeah.
askance, maybe, because it's an adverb. Askance, not an adjective. As that's when
Is
small.
askance an adverb? Hold on, let me
Yeah.
find the passage. I'm gonna give him an askance look.
Yeah,
Okay.
you looked at him
Is that-
askance, maybe,
Okay, you
Look,
can't. Is
askance
that
at
not
him.
proper? Okay.
or a sidelong look would be better. Actually, a sidelong look.
All right. Yeah, let me mark that down. I did not know that was a thing. Thank you.
Sure.
So askance is an adverb.
Okay.
Basically, you look askance at something you don't approve of it, but you look askance at it.
Okay.
It's one of those weird words that breaks a lot of the rules of the English language, of
Ah.
which there are several.
Yeah,
English is a terrible language with too many weird rules. It's
Well, yeah, it also doesn't follow its own rules.
yeah,
If you
exactly.
want like a rule, if you want like a more structured rule-based language, Spanish is much more consistent.
and Quechua is completely consistent. I think we should start speaking Quechua.
No, no, I have no gift for learning languages.
Well, that's
Same.
too bad.
I tried with 4 semesters of Spanish for my bachelor's. I am done with that.
You don't get to choose.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't. That's just your opinion.
Hey,
I-
what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Well, yes, and
Yeah.
By an imp. I'm not questioning your honor, Lord Janus. I'm denying its existence.
I
So,
do
are you-
so love that season.
Are you Jonas Flint then?
No, I'm not questioning your premise, Count Valerian. I'm denying its existence or validity.
You die. Then die screaming.
I've played before.
Think, Mark!
What?
Just doling out the references, aren't we?
Of course.
That's what we do
I mean-
around here. Well, that's what he does anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded like you guys liked it. I think. If you didn't like it, please tell me. Tell me why.
Oh yeah.
I think
was-
that's interesting. I would like to re-listen to it since I had to take care of something.
Okay. I can send you the transcript if you want.
Oh yeah, I much prefer having a hard copy.
Yeah.
This is
Yes.
mainly a
Yeah, I will.
This is a
Yeah, I'll message you. You can post it publicly if you want. I don't mind.
Okay.
Also, one thing I would like to stress is that the daughter, you will have met her before this in the story. Like this is a transition. You transition over to this guy, and you find out, oh, okay, he's this girl's father. What's going on? Why aren't they? They don't seem to care about each other. What's happening here? That's part of the mystery a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe he's just a rubbish parent.
There are definitely people who do not deserve to have kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Maybe he's
Oh man.
yeah, like movie Bob.
He was not who I was thinking of, but yes.
Who are you thinking of?
A person. There was on a video. There was a mom who was posting about how her son let a girl use a lit cigarette on, like, to put out a cigarette, used it on him, like burned him, and he did not retaliate. And she's like, yeah, the son's still improving and learning how to respect women.
Um,
That sounds like it might be a joke, but
It was not.
oh my god. Okay.
There's a difference between respecting women and accepting abuse.
Yeah.
It's like those stupid kids who are like, the Jedi way, I cannot fight you or do any harm. It's like, please defend yourself and not die.
Also, the Jedi are not and never were pacifists. That is Ryan Johnson's idiotic notion. Ocean of the Jedi.
That's just the idiotic thing that everyone got out of the prequels for some fucking reason. The prequels didn't actually do that, but everyone kept being like, "You're not supposed to be fighters." Blah blah blah. It's like, it's just, ugh.
I think that might have been the original trilogy.
Even the original trilogy, though, like they want him to kill people.
True. Yeah.
No pacifist will say, "Oh, so we're pacifists. We do no harm to anyone, except a specific group of people who we must be racist to at all times. Please kill them."
Also, another problem is that pacifism is an unfeasible lifestyle.
Indeed, it's what makes the Tuatan in the Wheel of Time so infuriating.
Yeah, because they're dumb.
It's like every time parents seem to think of them as an idiot, I'm like, yeah, I relate with you, mate. I sometimes just want to throw her off a cliff and be like, you gotta defend yourself now?
There are literal embodiments of evil coming at you to kill you. They're not people. They don't deserve to live.
Some of them don't even have souls. It's literally a thing, is that the Greymen don't have souls.
Yeah.
No, we don't would harm them.
Yeah. Alrighty. So, this is Night of the Abyss. So far what has happened is the Captain Arthur has been captured by a group of strange demons, and now his wife and father and mom are attempting to rescue him by leading an army into the old forest. While this is happening, a strange figure named Mordred is wandering through a twisted hellscape ape, and has finally reached a city in which some of his old friends are. And now we get to meet some of them. Okay. Mordred leaned backward against the wall and the tower, tapping the long tips of his clawed fingernails against the stones to examine the courtyard below him. Old friends were there, his old enemies. Alexandria, with her tall, slender frame and long hair flowing down her back, long green hair flowing down her back, white and red lined skin giving her a metallic look. Caesarius, bulky and built like a fireborn Barox, thick blue hair cut close to his head, likely to show off his purple and silver mottled skin, marked mostly silver on the shoulders. Gingeric, blue, green, old and red, interweaving in a patchwork over his still frame. Ames stood like a statue, not exposing any emotion. A few surprises, though. Mordred tilted his head and looked down at the few others that were standing in their own pentagrams. I did not expect Siegfried, Oblivion, Beowulf, or Pendragos to align with them. Those four were the most disparate out of the group. Siegfried and Oblivion looked more humanoid, despite one looking like an albino with golden eyes and black armor. The other golden and orange skin with bright red eyes and a few lines of the same color banding his legs and arms. However, Beowulf looked like a humanoid wolf, purple armor covering his body and a long ponytail held upward in a framework of metal, while Pendragos was a humanoid metal dragon with a silver and black hide. As he watched, the pentagrams all around the second group of Elder Ones, except for Siegfried, began glowing. As he'd expected, they all vanished. Hopefully this goes according to plan. Mordred reached out his hand and changed his scar into his sword. Black blade, black sword, or it shone with a dark aura, a line of silver patterning running down the blade, blue light shimmering along the edges, lending it an unearthly air. Calmly, he drove of the weapon into the wall and slid down the side of the fortifications, sword carving a blade carving a rent in the at a wall. For a moment, he considered walking in with the weapon on his shoulder, then decided against it. Better to give them no warning. Kara rode through the trees, glaive at the ready. Baruch and Ilana were on either side of her, though the plump preceptor was on a borrowed horse while Kara's bodyguard ran. There should be a bridge that way, Ilana pointed. There's probably a shortcut to another of the fortresses. I hope it's still... She cut off with a loud curse as they exited the tree line onto an open cliffside abutting a ravine that separated their section of the forest from the one on the other side. At an angle below them, the rocky ridge ledge melded into the forest, just as the hills sloped downward to a lower elevation of the dense treescape. They took out the bridge. Ilana's tone was so deflated that Kara bit back a remark about stating the obvious. Varys rode up beside them, face a stiff mask. Another man would be swearing vociferously, but Varys remained silent. We'll need to hurry to the... Kara didn't let him finish. She spurred his horse backward, then urged Wrath to a charge. Big warhorse thundered toward the edge and leaped into the air. Time stood still as they hung in the air. As they hung mid-leap. And with a clang from horseshoes striking stone, he landed on the other side and took off into the forest. A moment later, another crash and galloping hooves announced another horse coming behind her. Kara turned her head and saw that Varys had followed her. Shock caused her to rein up her horse, letting him catch up. Never took you for the overly dramatic or heroic type, Kara remarked as the older man came up beside her. He's my son, Varys said simply. When she gave him a questioning look, he elaborated. I'm going to save him. Kate can direct the army while we rescue him. Likely the best option will be stealth, so a small team of the two best people for the job seems the best choice. Kara nodded slowly. Let's ride, then. Mordred strode through the open gates of the courtyard, long black swords stored right inside his wrist. Glad to see you're all looking the same as ever, he remarked as he made a rude gesture at Alexandria. Her bright emerald eyes bulged as she turned to face him, green hair flying behind her. Not possible! By reflex, she extended her hand, an enormous curved sword appearing in her hand out of a gust of wind, green and black blades stylized in a jagged flame-like design. You were bound for eternity. Shackles deteriorate, bonds atrophy, and prisons fail. Mordred spun his sword. Mordred spread his hands. Innocently. I was surprised that all of you were here. My children succeeded in destroying your physical forms, it appears. Good for them. Traitorous bastard, Caesarius growled, his armor appearing on his body, thick purple plate and crested helm fitting his massive frame perfectly. Eloquent as ever, brother, Mordred remarked airily, glancing towards Siegfried. It seems that as though out of the lot of you, he's the furthest away from taking whatever poor fool's body is getting sacrificed. Exactly as I wanted it. Alexandria glanced at the nearly complete pentagram around her and snarled. You will not return to Yggdrasil, she threatened. Siegfried, kill him. Even if you lose your pentagram, you must not allow him to gain access to the physical world. As you wish, the pale elder one shrugged his massive broadsword off his shoulder and strode toward Mordred, leaving his pentagram behind. Shouldn't be too hard. He doesn't have his sword. Who has it, by the way? Mordred asked, preparing to change his scar into his sword. Not yet, he thought. Get closer. Lancelot. Alexandria dismissed her own blade and glared at him. You won't be able to get it back, traitor. We've seen to that. So my sword has been taken by the lioness. Putting the thought away for later, Mordred gave an ostentatious fake shiver. So confident, dear sister. You lost the right to call me that long ago, Mordred. Alexandria glanced down at the pentagram as if she were checking its progress. It had only a few lines left that weren't glowing. We will leave you here, alone, bound to wander the Amaran plain for eternity. Really? Mordred smiled. Because you think my former student can beat me? Of course he can. Caesarius' face was probably confused under his helmet, but that wasn't out of the ordinary. He has a sword. You don't. And that is why, as you so often are, you would be wrong. Mordred casually lifted his hand, keeping it somewhat limp. You took my sword, but you forgot about something far more deadly. Alexandria frowned in confusion. Then she screamed as the pentagram glowed bright gold and she began to fade away. Siegfried, run! Caesarius and Engeric seemed about to attack and damn the consequences of their pentagrams being completed without them. Before they could take more than a step, they vanished. Siegfried froze and Mordred seized the opening. His black sword dropped into his hand and he dashed forward, stabbing towards Siegfried's chest. To his shock, Siegfried shifted to the side, letting Mordred's blade pass beneath his arm. Then swung his own sword at Mordred's head. I'm out of practice, Mordred thought as he put his hand on the flat of his sword and used the flat to turn Siegfried's blade aside and spin out of the way so that he could slash at his leg. Smoothly, Siegfried spun his sword in front of him, knocking Mordred's aside, then swung at him as he brought his blade around his head in a diagonal slash. Sensing the move, Mordred held his sword at an angle, letting his enemy's weapon slide down his sword, then attacked at his enemy's sword arm. With a quick move, Siegfried released his sword with his left hand, pulling his sword arm back just enough to miss Mordred's swing, then counterattacked with a one-handed slice. Instead of jumping backward, Mordred rolled under Siegfried's arm and made a dash toward the pentagram. No! Siegfried screamed as he chased after Mordred, blade hissing as it swung for his head. Taking the hilt in both hands, Mordred spun around, knocking the sword out of the way with the flat of his blade, then drove his weapon through his former pupil's chest. Siegfried spasmed, then his flesh began to slowly disintegrate into white flecks. I'm sorry, my old friend, Mordred said sadly, but this death is one you won't come back from. Siegfried looked down at the hilt of Mordred's sword where the name was inscribed. His eyes widened, and he screamed as the motes of his spirit were absorbed into the weapon. Power flooded into Mordred, making him gasp and shake his head. A clang made him shake out of his stupor and pick up Siegfried's fallen weapon and armor, transforming the sword into a triangular silver scar on his right wrist and the armor into a set of lines along his chest and legs. Concentrating hard, Mordred walked over to the pentagram, then waved his hand over the spell, changing all the symbols from Siegfried's name to his own, right as the lines finished lighting up. Kara and Varys dismounted and slipped through the underbrush toward the large, dilapidated temple surrounded by trees. For whatever reason, trees did not grow inside or through the temple. Instead, it seemed as if it had created a void around itself where you could not have any plant life. Even the strange, overly large trees that dominated the landscape around them. All around the temple were men in black armor with the painted fire and water and wind symbols on their chests, all holding weapons they seemed able to use by how comfortable they held them. It looks like stealth isn't going to be much of an option. Casually, Varys pulled his crossbow off his horse's saddle and cranked the weapon's lever. Best to go in with ranged attacks, then try to cut our way through to him while the demon army is distracted elsewhere. Kara followed suit with her longbow. Then stuck her glaive butt first into the ground within easy reach. Varys did the same with his long-tipped halberd before setting his diamond-shaped shield against the haft. Casually, he laid an arrow on the table of his crossbow. Move down the line from opposite ends, but focus on the archers, Varys instructed, putting the stock against his shoulder. I'll take left. I'll be on your right. Kara nodded and pulled back her string. Race to the middle, she offered grimly. No competition, just get the job done. Varys took aim at the one on the far left and loosed. The man fell, dropping his crossbow and clutching his neck with a broadhead that had gone through his breastplate. Everything is a competition, old man. And Kara smiled and aimed at her target, then fired, then loosed. Right through his eye. 291. She turned under shaft, under bow, under aim and loosed 2 shafts at the same time, the arrows splitting apart and hitting 2 men standing next to each other. 293. Show off. Varys shook his head and let loose another shaft, after as the alarm began sounding through the temple. This time the man got his shield up in time. Grunting, Varys took aim at it again and got another man through the leg, causing him to stumble and drop the shield right before he got a shaft through his cheekbone. Methodically, Kara kept firing, dropping archer after archer, especially the ones on the top of the temple's ledges. At this point, they had gotten wise to their position and started running toward them. Kara drilled a few shafts through their legs and crippled the first few men, dropping them to the ground so that Varys could get them with his crossbow. By the time they got onto the 2 lone archers, the cultists were thinned down to 6 people running toward them, holding up their shields. Grimacing, Varys took one last shot with his crossbow, then set the heavy weapon aside so he could grab his crescent moon-bladed halberd and his shield. Kara followed his example with her bow, then pulled her glaive out of the ground. Come on, she growled, then swung her glaive at one of the men with the shield, trying to get at his leg, but he blocked her strike and returned with an axe swing. Kara spun out of the way, using her shaft to hook the axe blade out of his hand, then drew her tonso blade and then shoved it through his unprotected mouth. Gasping, he dropped, allowing Kara to spin her glaive around her head, forcing her enemies to back off. 299. Off to the side, Kara saw Varys handling 3 men at once with sword and shield. His halberd and shield. Now with sword and shield, but Kara could see more cultists streaming out of the temple. We need to run, she yelled, stabbing another man through the neck with her glaive before spinning around another one and hamstringing him with a quick slash across the leg. Grunting, Varys struck his opponent's blade aside, then sliced his thigh, causing him to drop to the ground, blood pouring out of his leg. Looking like an old lion, Varys growled and rushed forward, slamming his bastard sword against his opponent's helmet, the sturdy blade sending out chips of metal as the old man bashed his enemy down. Finally, the helmet split along with its wearer's head. Thinking quickly, Kara knocked her final opponent backward with a firm thwack of her glaive, then spun it through her weapon at Varys' remaining enemy's back. It slid easily through his plate, the middle around her glaive glowing a bright red color. Her final cultist guard rushed at her, but in one fluid motion she turned, drew her sword, and sliced off his arm with a single slash, then followed it up with his head. 304, Kara thought, raising her sword into a ready position and whistling to her horse, when a loud shriek came down from the sky. She only had time to shift slightly when a large winged furry creature smashed through the trees and slammed into her back. Somehow her wrist flicked her sword upward while all her fingers instinctively released it, letting the monster snatch it out of the air and throw it to the side. Thinking quickly, Kara grabbed a rock and slammed it into the creature's taloned foot. Shrieking, the monster flapped upward, nursing one of its feet. Grabbing her bow and arrows, Kara instinctively pulled the string back and loose. The beast's red eyes bulged as it flew back fell backward, convulsing around the arrow lodged in its chest. Gasping, Kara recovered her sword and looked around, trying to find an opponent. She got what she wanted. More cultists were coming out of the temple, swords and other weapons drawn. Kara feathered a few of them with shafts, but they quickly surrounded them with steel. Hefting his shield, Varys spun on his sword with a quick flourish, obviously preparing to fight his way through like the old lion he was. No. Kara dropped her bow and drew her sword as the cultists parted to reveal a tall, armored demon with dark blue skin, a spear in one hand and a spear in the other. Do not kill them. Kara stared at the new creature. It had no mouth. Why did it not have a mouth and yet still able to talk? The monster continued. More hosts will be not needed for the other kings. These have proven themselves worthy of the honor. Where is my husband? Kara demanded, pointing her sword at the creature. We have an entire army coming down on your position. I suggest you hand him over. The creature turned his red eyes on her, impassive face unreadable. Put that toy away, human. With inhuman speed, the demon smacked her blade aside with his sword, then shoved his spear through her leg. Kara screamed and dropped to one knee, then cut it off when he backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling to the ground. With a quick yank, the demon pulled his spear free and placed the long tip against her arm. Surrender, old human, he said, eyes fixed on Varys, or I will start working on crippling her. Fear boiled inside Kara at the thought of him slowly destroying her body before killing her. Eyes furious, Varys set his sword down along the shield. What are you going to do with us? Your bodies will be offered to my brethren on the other side of the veil. The blue demon motioned to the cultists to grab Varys and Kara. There are still a few on the other side. The wit will take days to summon them. Lord Gilgamar. Cultists ran out of the temple and bowed. The transition is almost complete. King Siegfried is nearly through. Excellent. Gilgamar's face seemed to give the impression of smiling despite not having a mouth or much movement below his eyes. Let these two bear witness to the coming of King Siegfried and see their own fate. The cultists dragged Kara and Varys into the temple deep inside the ancient building. They descended further and further down into the depths of the temple, into a large circular room where a large box with strange arcane symbols were carved into the sides. They seemed to glow with a golden luminescence, pulsing every 3 seconds. What is that? Kara asked, eyes fixed on the boxes. She and Varys were forced to their knees. The vessel of an ancient god, one of the cultists explained, an insane fervor burning in her eyes. And you are blessed to witness it, unbeliever. Smoke began to rise from under the lid as it lifted upwards and to the side, allowing what was inside to rise and rest an unsteady left hand on the lip for some additional balance. The cultists started to murmur. Too early, they said. Too early. Kara wanted to scream. It was Arthur, but it was wrong. He looked significantly younger, like Dagonia herself had peeled back the years to when he was in his late teens or early 20s. More disturbing things stuck out to her. She stared at him, eyes brimming with tears of horror and grief. The left hand that rested on the lip of the coffin was overly long in both the arm, hand, and fingers, almost as if someone had elongated everything about it just enough to be noticeable without being ungainly. His left ear was also deformed, with 2 spiked extensions extending from the tips, almost like a dorsal fin. Over his body was an intricately layered and sometimes overlapping pattern of scars that had somehow filled in with silver tissue, but strange ridges ran down his right arm to his back and up his neck to his chin. She looked closer. She saw that a spiky protrusion ran down his spine from the base of his skull to the small of his back. What have you done to him? Varys choked out. What have you done to my son? Rather than gloating as he had been, Gilgamar looked shocked. "You!" he roared abruptly, just as a ragged suit of armor and a blue half-cloak and wolf helm cap appeared on the figure's body. A massive black sword that seemed to suck in the light appeared in the new demon's hand as it leaped impossibly high into the air and came down, blade slamming into a pair of the cultists, slicing them in half. He swung one-handed again, taking off the heads of the cultists, holding Sankara on their knees. Snarling, the creature raised his hand, and the fingers seeming not to work properly, then forced his hand closed. With a terrible crack, spears of black energy sprayed from him and cut down the remaining cultists. Kara stared at the creature in awe. He'd killed 14 men in 2.5 seconds with one hand. For a moment, he looked down at her, a strange hunger in his expression flashing across his face before it became frighteningly still. Feeling like a crippled bird looking at a wolf, she stared into his hood and saw her husband's face, just younger and covered in silver scars. But his eyes made her shrink back from him. Those eyes weren't human. The only way she could describe the irises were oil-colored, mostly purple, but with swirls of black through the purple and an ever-shifting dark ocean. Those eyes are ancient, she thought as he turned away from her toward the other demon, weakly flexing his malformed hand and glaring as if it wasn't being responsive. Abruptly, Kara realized that the arm wasn't moving properly. The fingers twitched jerkily, and the arm itself hung limply. That's why he moved so fast, she realized. He knew his arm wasn't working, so he improvised. But so fast. She thought as he let his enormous sword lean against his shoulder, a monstrosity of black steel that nobody could have wielded with one hand as dexterously as this creature was able to. "Still skilled as ever, Mordred," Gilgamar remarked as he spun his spear through his fingers and pointed his sword at the creature that had been her husband. "I'm surprised. Lancelot was given your sword after you were thrown down that ravine. I hope you're not going to try to fight me with a sword made from raw firmament. It wouldn't be a good fight. You didn't urge me well enough." Suddenly, the creature, the thing wearing Arthur's face, raised his sword, the enormous black a blade edged with a bright silver line. "You all thought I destroyed Artorius' blade. You were wrong." "No," Gilgamar backed away, red eyes wide. "It can't. It's a fake." "No." Mordred raised his sword near his face, blade tilted at an angle. "I thought I would find a use for this, and turns out I was right." "Fine," Gilgamar growled, tightening his grip on his spear. "I'll finish what you should have 4,000 years ago." "No." Mordred ran his eyes from the crossguard to the tip, then turned his gaze toward the blue demon. "My work is only beginning." Purple and black smoke swirled around the strange, ragged-looking figure, shadows swirling around his blade like a whirlpool of darkness. "We need to leave." Varys grabbed her by her good arm and started dragging her away. "But Arthur, he's dead, Kara." Varys shook her, causing a spasm of pain to shoot through her arm. "We need to run while we still can." And that's the end.
So, some people turned into demons, and other people hacked each other.
A little bit, yeah.
And Arthur's wife found out that Arthur turned into a demon.
Elder one, but yes, he's no longer human.
It counts.
Yeah. Technically, it's more like a corporeal angel.
Corporeal angel. That seems self-contradictory.
Well, it depends. Some angels are resurrected beings. Some are still waiting.
Hmm. Interesting. What else was I going to mention? Oh, there was one small place where you had like hand twice in the same sentence. No big deal though.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anywhere else to use hand. Like, since it's the subject of the sentence, we don't need to find it. Find it.
Yeah, that's no big deal, but yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, demon or not, it'd be a little off-putting to meet your significant other and he's turned in, or he or she has turned into one.
Yeah. Or has literally been killed and his brain replaced with an not human being.
Yes.
What?
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah. I think we all do.
Most people.
Unless they're hot, in which case, cool.
But wouldn't they have been hot before mine was possessed?
Oh, true, but there's always like the fact that their bodies can be altered. Depends. Really depends on the thing.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
But this, I think, answers your question from a while back. Is what does Mordred have? What does this weird figure have to do with Varys and the rest of the gang? Well, this is your answer.
Yeah, I forgot. What was he related to them or something?
No, he's not even remotely related. He's been down there for 3,000 years on Idrisil. And now
Yeah, didn't they say 4,000 years? It was a long time anyway. His work was finished 4,000 years ago, and then he says it's only begun.
That's referring to when he killed Arthurius and took his sword.
Okay, cool.
3,000 years is his time frame for being imprisoned, since there was 1,000 years where life was decent. Any other thoughts?
Sparring chap, Zelky chap.
Silky.
Zelky Jap, seriously.
Sorry, I don't know where that came from.
Alright. Well, I think that'll call it good for today. Oh, thank you. Yeah, they're these three. Mordred's going to be working together with these three to try and beat the other Elder Ones.
He's with the good guys, or are there good guys?
These are good guys, yeah. Like Mordred's a good guy.
Okay, good. It's nice that someone's a good guy anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to be going up against people like Mordred's more of a Simon Peter type, man of the people, whereas Alexandrius, Cesarius, and Gengaric have a serious god complex.
Well, we all know about that.
Yeah, especially me.
More like Satan complex.
True.
But yes.
Oh. Actually, now that I think about it. Yeah.
You're correct, sir.
That one was that was actually appropriate.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I think that'll conclude it for today. Thank you guys all for coming. Okay, we should be doing our Batman Era 1 podcast on Monday. On Wednesday, I believe we will be. I'm going to try and do the influences as writers stream. I don't know how long that will be, since it got suggested a while back and we haven't had the chance to do it.
Yeah, which maybe it shouldn't. Maybe 5:30 is a little. Your time is a little late for that one.
Possibly. Maybe we'll do Thursday afternoon on that one. And figure out stuff.
I'm better for Wednesday afternoon than Thursday.
True. It'll really depend on who wants to come, and I know like Wednesday, like the earliest I get home from taking my sister to skating is about 4:35 ish. But either way, we will see you then. Adios.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Have a roll, yeah.